Welcome to the Creative Community Podcast presented by Destination Arete. I'm David.
And I'm Mark, and we're building a community of creatives who work together to achieve creative excellence. Today's guest is award-winning fine artist, Michael Malm.
Mike joins us today to talk about figure drawing and mentorship and how that played a role in his career. Mike is an amazing figure artist and just a wonderful representational artist just as a whole. He's just got incredible stuff. And then he also shared the history of the Mormon tradition of fine art. So without further ado, here's our conversation with fine artist Mike Malm.
My name is Mike Malm. I live up in northern Utah. I don't know. I have loved art ever since I was a kid. I wasn't necessarily raised in a real cultured family. Not that we didn't have a little bit of culture around us as far as just in our family, but always supported and encouraged by my parents, and which is a huge blessing, you know. But I've been blessed all along the way to make a career out of this, and it's kind of been one step at a time and one door opening at a time, and a lot of hard work and blood, sweat, and tears, and all of that kind of stuff. But all in all, I'm so grateful. It's an absolute privilege to be able to try to observe and study creation around us, you know, and the beauty of what God has put in front of us, and try to translate that into paint, you know, and to share it with people. And so I love it. I love that. I'm just so grateful I get to do it, you know. I have 4 kids. My wife and I have been married for a long time, and we have 4 kids. One kid has grown up and married, and anyway, so life is exciting, and you just never know what's around the corner. But we've just been super blessed. You know, I'm just grateful I can do what I do.
That's awesome. Can you share something that you're maybe been working on recently, even if it's just that painting behind you, if you can tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So as you can see back there, there's a smaller piece and then a larger piece in progress. The smaller piece was a commission that I kind of proposed, and the people liked it. And so I went ahead and painted it, and I liked it. And that is so it's Christ calming the waters, you know. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you can see it very well.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay. And I really liked the way it turned out. And I thought, man, I want to make this like an epic painting, right? So the commission painting is like, how big is that? It's 60 inches wide by like 35 inches tall or something like that. And so I decided to go like 60 inches tall by 108 inches wide. And so I'm working on the big one now, just kind of laying it in, and I'm pretty excited about it. You know, it's fun to just kind of, and I'm just doing it because I want to do it. You know, sometimes you have those pieces that are like, man, I worked through a lot of problems and figured a lot of things out. And I think I want to make this epic, right? So I'm just doing it for myself, and who knows what will come of it. But anyway, so that's what I'm working on right now. Got that going.
If you're listening to the audio of the podcast right now, go find the YouTube version, because it's really cool. So, well, Mike, we could probably spend half an hour talking about how to make a smaller painting bigger, but we have some specific questions we wanted to ask you. And you talked a little bit about blood, sweat, and tears. And if someone goes on your website or finds your social media, there's lots of figures. There's several figures in the painting behind you right now. And we wanted to ask you, what is it about figure drawing that we worded it this way, that makes most people give up? But I kind of really want to know, like, what is the reward that you find when you finally get those figures figured out? You know, when you finally nail that figure that you're working on, what's the reward for you, and what are the struggles that you face maybe along the way?
You know, the figure is it's always a challenge in drawing, right? It's getting things drawn right. To address the first part of your question, you know, there is to get a successful figure and something that's expressive and beautiful, you know, there's a gesture. So like, if you know Steve Houston, he talks about structure and gesture. I don't know if you're familiar with that concept, but a beautiful figure has an overall kind of a movement through the figure, and just a beautiful, line of movement that creates the grace and the beauty. But there's also, within that, you have to put the parts in there. So, the anatomy, the pieces of that. And I think getting that to work sometimes can be hard. And the hardest thing you do, I think the hardest thing that you can do is work from a live model, or just doing the figure in general, because if one little thing is off, everyone knows it, right? I mean, if you're painting a landscape and the tree's not exactly the way it appears in nature, before your eyes, like, well, it doesn't matter. In fact, you'll change that to make a better composition or whatever. And it doesn't really matter that much, But if you get something wrong in the figure, well, everyone knows it. I mean, one of my kids can come in and look at that and think, man, that's just, something's wrong with that guy, or that gal, or whatever you're painting. And so people just know. So there's a challenge to it. And then the challenge in just the drawing and trying to bring those two ideas together, gesture and structure, but also to be able to create something and use some artistic license, and not just copy a photo or something, but exaggerate some things and use the figure, use your reference or your model before you to flesh out an idea, but not necessarily copy what's in front of you, but to make it into something that you want it to be, to express an idea of some kind, And so that's another layer of difficulty in learning how to do that, But any effort you take with the figure, I think is worth it. Any struggle, because if you learn to represent the figure well, and I think you can do anything. You can draw anything if you can do the figure. And so it's good practice, even if you're not good at it right away. Just keep practicing, and keep at it, and you'll get better. And you'll see that your confidence in drawing will increase, which will help your painting. Because in painting, if you're confident that you can draw well, it's okay if you cover up that line, right? If you do a preliminary drawing, like, you're not so worried about it, because you know that you can do it again, because you have that confidence, and your brushwork is more confident, and you're not hesitant because you're worried about the drawing, right? Mm-hmm. And so anyway, so I think it can benefit anybody, even if they're not a figure painter. Or work with the figure much.
That's really helpful. I wanted to go back to one thing that you said, where you said that you learn how to copy the figure, and then eventually you can use it, you can exaggerate it to communicate. And I wanted to know from you, looking back on your career, or just your artistic journey in general, when do you feel like you moved from copying figures to being able to communicate with them? And what was maybe the thing that made it click for you to be like, oh, I can now use, these not just to represent a human being, but I can use them to communicate mood, atmosphere, even emotion?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think part of that is in your development of being able to communicate ideas. For me, I think I'm on that road. Like I'm learning how to do it. And part of that for me is letting go of fear that without, for a long time, and I still do this, I'll put kind of not a real detailed grid, but just a slight grid of markings on my image, because I'll work with it in Photoshop, and then I get the composition just the way I want it. And sometimes I'll go in Photoshop and adjust and tweak the figures in there. And then I'll put some lines, some reference lines. So when I draw it on my canvas, I have those lines so I can place things correctly. But in a way, I feel like that's been a little bit of a crutch, because I'm so reliant on it. And so more recently, I'm pushing myself to maybe have a very crude, maybe a few lines, but let me draw, because when I draw it a little more without all the lines and references, it pushes me to, I guess I put myself into it more. I don't know how to explain that. I think we all have different biases, or hopefully different intentions with the piece to make it communicate what you want, the emotion that you want. And so part of that, to answer your question, is to leave the fear of that and go forward with faith that, listen, I have an idea with this figure, and I'm going to struggle with it maybe a little bit at first, so I can just really flesh out what I'm trying to say. I may want to elongate the body a bit, or create just a little more grace in the arm or something, and just push beyond the photo reference. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm kind of on that path and exploring that, because when I look at like Nicolai Fechin, he was so good at it. Like the man was just brilliant. Mm-hmm. That is what you can do if you have a knowledge of the figure, but you're willing to edit the figure and to compose, be a composer of your of the figure, rather than just copying a photograph. And I think that's what sets him apart from people who are just so reliant on copying that photo heavily. But there's just the possibilities of expression are just amazing, and when you go into the museums and you see the Renaissance artists and a lot of the artists that I admire, John Singer Sargent, like he was putting he was imposing kind of a style or a kind of a grace on the figures that isn't, it's just not natural. It doesn't look like a photo, but it's so beautiful, and it just expresses this beauty and grace, Yeah. So anyway, long answer. Sorry.
That's great. I love that you brought up Fechin, because some of his pictures, I'm picturing, especially his group scenes when he's got a lot of figures in there. Like there's one, I think, where they're all either bathing or they're washing their clothes, and the little girl's face in that, it's like something out of Mad Magazine, but just rendered to a like fine art type of rendering. Or like the slaughterhouse one where the kid is like slitting the neck of that bull, and his face it's so exaggerated, it's so pushed, and you feel it. It's I was reading on your website, and you had a quote by Tolstoy on there of that, a language or written words can communicate thoughts, but images or art can convey feeling. And I love that you were talking about communicating with the figure, and that you brought up Fechin, because that's immediately who I go to too, just like, oh, that guy had it. He just had it.
Man, he was so good. So I had a chance to go to St. Petersburg a few years back and see this painting at the Repin Institute. There's I think it's his diploma piece or something. It's this huge piece. It's called the Cabbage Festival, and it blew me away. Do you know the painting I'm talking about?
Yes, I do. I've never seen it in person, but I know the Cabbage Festival piece.
Oh my goodness! I should send you photo. I guess we got some really good photos of it that you would probably like. I mean, I geek out over that stuff. I'm sure we all do, right? Because we're kind of art nerds. Man, it was so good. But yeah, like the figures they're like larger than life. It's I don't know. It's hard to express how I felt about that when I saw it. But man, it was so good, But even guys like Waterhouse, J.W. Waterhouse, when you study those works, the figures are so beautiful. They don't look like photographs to me. They look like, I don't know, there's a difference, there's a difference. And I think it comes down to drawing and designing the figure versus copying the figure, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a knowledge there about how the figure works, but they're using the figure to convey an idea, and it's not, instead of the other way around, Yeah. So anyway. So the figure serves their purposes, and they have more control over the message of their painting and that feeling that they're after, right? Because they have that confidence in knowing how to make those adjustments. And I think a lot of those things come from studying the masters. How do they do it? What did Sargent do to make that so elegant? Or those kinds of things. So,
Mike, this is a bit of a softball, but do you have any resources for people who want to learn how to paint the figure?
Yeah, well, thank you for asking. I've been working with Santine Academy, and we've put together a course on there. It's a course about it's designed to begin at the very basic principles and kind of build up to in the end doing a backlit portrait. So working with a portrait and lighting. So we talk a lot about light and how to convey light in a piece, as well as drawing and all the other foundational things. But the thing that's good about it, I think, is that it starts at just basic principles, but it's those basic principles that that I always go back to when I'm working on one of these pieces or something. It's always the fundamentals that are the most important things, and drawing is the number one thing. Like, you just have to practice, because if you can draw well, it's going to help everything else, So we talk about drawing, we talk about values, and values is the other thing that's it's so important. If you can draw well and you can learn how to handle values, man, you've got it, like 3/4 of the game mastered, right? I mean, there's a lot more like composition and those kinds of things, but those things in representational painting, if you understand, you could draw well and understand the values and simplifying values, man, you're off to the races,
David here wanted to take a quick second to tell you guys about Vision X Live. Vision X Live is a 3-day virtual art conference that brings the world's top artists together to share our vision of the future through a series of live presentations, demos, question and answers, and more. You can visit visionxlive.com to learn more about the conference. Mark and I actually have been asked to be live event hosts for this conference, and we are so excited to be involved in what is going to be a great weekend this summer in July. So go to visionxlive.com to get your tickets. In fact, I just saw online a former guest from the podcast, Nathan Drushinen, got his ticket, and he will be there. So come join us this summer and meet some amazing artists and learn from them and what they have to share with us about creating excellent art. We'll see you there. We like to talk a lot about mentorship on the show here, and I know you've mentioned some famous artists that you look up to, but is there anyone specific that mentored you as you were coming up in art, or when you reached a point where you said, I just need something extra, I need somebody, and it's okay if not, but I just didn't know if you could point to anybody, along the way that you said this person's impact, whether it was direct or indirect, really had a huge role in helping me grow.
There's a few key people. There's a lot of people who have been an influence on me throughout my career. But when I went to college, I went to Dixie College, just down in southern Utah, when I got out of high school, and there was a guy there named Del Parson, and he is like a portrait painter. He's done a lot of religious paintings and things. I didn't know who he was. I was familiar with his work, but I had no idea I was taking a class from him. I was really oblivious to anything. But he put my feet on the path. He was teaching foundational representational painting principles, which weren't that common back in those days, right? Makes me sound really old, but it's been a while. But there's so much available today by way of instruction. But back then, I didn't know what I was getting, but what a blessing to be introduced to Del. And he just kind of, anyway, I count him as just getting me started on the right path, So I started doing portraits and things with Del, and he was great. And he said one thing to me. I did this painting after, so I got married while I was down there, and he said, Mike, I did this little portrait painting we put in this student show, and I remember him coming up to me. He says, Mike, you can do anything you want to do in art. And that, just him saying that, was such a shot in the arm for me. Yeah. Like, man, it just gave me a lot of confidence that someone believed in me who was a very accomplished professional, so for somebody to say that was really helpful. And then Perry Stewart is another professor I had when I went to another. I got an associate's degree down in St. George, and then went up to Cedar City, which is just north of St. George, where Dixie College is. Studied with Perry Stewart, and Perry was very influential because he really opened my eyes as to what was being done in the art world. I mean, I really didn't know. And he had artists come there and do little like seminars. It was just awesome. We had Richard Schmid come to this little school down in southern Utah. So he came, and at the time, I had just discovered Richard Schmid a year or two before while looking through some magazines at Dixie College, and then to find out he got Richard Schmid to come, like, it was amazing, So Perry was fantastic, and he taught me a lot about composition. He was really into illustration. Those were the classes I was taking. Mm-hmm. And so it really helped me learn a lot about thinking about design, thinking about composition, and how to put an image together. So he was very influential, and a great help. And then I came up to Utah State, up at northern Utah. That's in the Valley. That's where we are now. And, I didn't work a lot with Glenn Edwards, but Glenn was an influence. He was a great instructor up here for a lot of years. And there's a great program up here at Utah State for, gosh, probably 30 years. They were putting out professional artists out of Utah State. And so I kind of caught the tail end of that. But so those are kind of the main ones. I've taken classes from like Dan Gerhardt's was somebody I really admired and looked up to, and I was able to take a couple classes from him. And I took a class from Ron Hicks and Kwang Ho. I had a class from Kwang Ho that was just so good. It's just what I needed at the time, So I look at those people as, in a small way as kind of mentors. They're just so generous with their knowledge, and there's many others, but they're just so kind and generous, sharing what they know. And anyway, not to mention just friends that I have that we critique each other and help each other out. That we get together and we'll have critiques and stuff, and those guys are kind of my mentors too in a lot of ways, and so we kind of benefit each other by influencing each other and giving each other critiques and things like that. So it's ongoing, and I hope I can pass that along to somebody else. So I try to, I felt like doing the sentient thing was important. It helps me to help other people if I can. And anyway, so yeah, so I definitely think mentorship is important and very helpful, Anyway, it's been a great benefit for me.
I wanted to ask you, and David, if you have a follow-up too, you can say it, but I wanted to ask you, you guys are getting together, the guys who you hang out with and you are like amazing artists, like world-class. So what are your guys' critiques like? Like if you're already that good, what are you guys saying to each other?
That's a great question.
So
yeah,
I'm just curious, what is that like? What are you guys telling each other?
Man, when you're working on a piece, and you're working on it forever, and you just, after a while you stop seeing it, and so when you put it out there to your guys, to your friends, or they come over like, hey, just tell me what, give me some feedback. It's so good. I don't, because sometimes you just don't see a little something that's like maybe could be tweaked, maybe something isn't reading as very clear as you thought maybe it was, but it's just, and I don't know. It's helpful. We're not perfect artists, right? And we all had different biases and things, but I think getting feedback really, it's just so good. It's so good because sometimes you'll take what they have to say and you're like, nah, I maybe you don't agree with it, but other things they'll say, you're like, man, that's a really good point. I really need to address that. And it's good. It's good to get an honest critique because I think we all realize that we want to be better, and we kind of have similar goals in the way that we want to paint and communicate. And so getting feedback from people like that is just helpful, So there's a lot of things. Like usually on a piece, there's like maybe 3 or 4 things that come up. They're like, you should look at this, or this figure looks weird, it doesn't anyway. And it's good. It's honest and it's great, So there's always something to say. I don't know. Yeah.
No, that's what I'm getting from that is like everyone out there, including myself, if Michael Malm is still getting critique from people, like you can take a critique. Okay. Like you can stand to have someone look at your work. I don't care who you are. So that's super
totally.
Cool. Yeah.
It's important. It's important to get feedback. Sometimes it's my wife. My wife will come in and just think, oh, that looks great or whatever. That's what I want to hear. But sometimes she'll come in and she'll say, oh, something's weird about that hand, or what is that you're painting? What is that supposed to be? And so when things like that happen, I consider it. I'm like, okay, I'll try to look at it, from a different perspective from somebody else. And sometimes it's really valid, And so, I think it's good. It's good to just kind of be open to just seeing it. Let somebody come with a fresh eye and take a look at something. Sometimes with these guys, I look at the piece and it's like, the problem with this painting is it just doesn't have your signature. You know what I mean? So sometimes that's the case, right? It's like, dude, you nailed it. That is killer, like don't touch it. But sometimes there's just little things like, well, what if you did this? What if you like, look at this shape, look at, maybe there's a tangent or an edge that's just catching my attention away from this, what you want us to look at, or, there's just, anyway, it's good. It's always good. I would encourage anybody to get a little think tank, together and just have critiques as often as you can, because it's just good. Right. Yeah. And none of us are perfect. So it's helpful to have some people around you to kind of give you some guidance,
Yeah, that's awesome. I have another question backing up a little bit, but David, do you have anything that you'd like to?
No, I'm just along for the ride right now, apparently.
Okay. You mentioned 2 teachers at the beginning of this kind of last segment, and I was curious what their training was. Like, what lineage were they from? Because you said one of them was teaching representational art at a time when that wasn't really being taught. So like, if you know, who taught him?
Yeah, that's a good question. So Del Parson, he studied he went to BYU, and he studied with William Whitaker. Do you guys know William Whitaker's work? He passed away not very long ago, but he was he was just a wonderful figure painter. He did portraits and things. He's pretty well known. He would exhibit at the Prix de West and other kind of probably the other one, the Autry, when the Autry was having their exhibit. He was part of those shows, and was pretty well into those circles. I'm not sure where he got his training, but he was obviously trained, kind of classically trained. So that's an interesting question. That would be interesting to go back and research where kind of he was trained. Perry Stewart, the other guy, he went and studied with Glenn. He was from Utah State. He came to Utah State, and Perry's awesome. You should, if you don't know these guys, you should look up their work. But Perry's on Instagram. I think Dell might be on Instagram too. He's doing a lot of kind of Christian art, a lot of paintings of Christ. Perry is doing a lot of the guy is so versatile. He works in all kinds of mediums, and he's good at all of them. But he does a little more illustration kinds of things. Just very, very accomplished. Anyway, really awesome. But he studied under Glenn Edwards at Utah State, and I know Glenn went to the what's it called in Pasadena, the no, it's not the Academy, it's Art Center.
Cal Arts,
or Art Center,
Art Center in Pasadena. Okay. So he went and studied there, I believe, and of course there's just a ton of awesome artists who were teaching there. Yeah. Anyway, so we could probably research that and take it back, but
well, thank you for answering that question. That's just me personally. Yeah. Whenever I hear who people study with, I always like to go back and see, because especially in the last few generations of artists, with the modern art movement, I'm always curious who was still painting that way, over that gap, that sort of 1890 to, who wasn't an illustrator of the golden age. I'm always curious who those guys are. So, and then I like to go Google them and research. So thank you so much for sharing that with me.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, and it segues into our last question, which we've never asked a question like this on the podcast before, but we were curious to know, is there a Mormon tradition of fine art? There's different schools in Europe. There's different schools of fine art, and you can, like we're just doing right now, we can trace back, this person learned from this person, but we didn't know if you had any insight into that, if you think there is, or if you think there isn't. We're just curious to hear your ideas and your opinions on that.
That is I've thought a lot about your question, and I think about in my faith. So I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and in our faith we have what's called the Articles of Faith. So somebody asked Joseph Smith, who is our the first leader of the church, about what do we believe, right? And so he listed out 13 articles of faith, and in the last one, in the 13th, I'm going to go over by my computer because I have this up so I can get it right. The last part of that says, if there's anything virtuous, lovely, or of good report or praiseworthy, we seek after these things, right? So So it doesn't matter where it comes from. I mean, we believe we're all children of God, and we're all creative beings created in his image. And I mean, he is the great creator, right? And we are his children. And so as his children, that's who we are. So we're creators, right? But we seek after anything that is uplifting, that is edifying, that lifts people, that points to God ultimately. And so that, I think that is kind of a foundation that we have in the church. But also it's interesting because going back to talking about specifically about kind of the church's view on art, it's always been important to the church to cultivate the arts. There was a group of artists, I think there were 4 of them who were in Salt Lake when the members of the church, the Latter-day Saints, they came out west, started to establish Utah. And there was a group of artists who wanted to be trained because there was only so much they didn't have anything around them to learn from. And so they proposed, so this was John Hafen and Loris Pratt. And there was a couple of other ones. Let's see, John Fairbanks. Anyway, these guys, they approached the church, say, hey, listen, we really want to, we need some training. And if you'll help us out, help us get to Paris to study, and we'll come back and we'll help do murals for the temples, inside the temples, and other artwork, to just for the church and just for, just to kind of bring that cultivation back. So they went over and studied, gosh, I wish I had a date. Let's see, 1890, I think, or right around that time. There were 4 of them who went over there, and their job was to study art, and so they studied. I wish I had more information for you, but I think it's really interesting. They came back, and there was a lot. They were very classically trained, and I wish I knew the ateliers, the places that they were. But anyway, they spent time over there and studied, and came back and just did this great artwork. And so it's just kind of brought that culture into the church. And I just think that's interesting. They did some beautiful things, beautiful portraiture and stuff. So we have those things as kind of a heritage. But for me growing up, there was one of my first heroes was Arnold Freeburg. And I don't know if you know that name, Arnold Freeburg, but he was a very accomplished artist, and he did a lot of paintings for the Book of Mormon that they put in the publication of the Book of Mormon, and they are just so good. Like he was one, going back to the figure, like they're heroic figures, right? He painted heroic things to try to convey the idea of the stories, right? And they're so beautiful. And right now they're on display. If you're ever in Salt Lake and you want to see them, they're on display at the conference center in Salt Lake City. They have them on display there with a lot of other great artwork throughout that building. But Arnold Freeburg for me was kind of like one of my first big heroes, because that's those artwork that I saw, and it was so good. It had a real impact on me. The magazines that the church puts out, there's always artwork, usually always putting artwork in there. There's a real appreciation for Carl Bloch. Do you guys know Carl Bloch? He's a Danish artist who did a lot of Christian art.
Yeah,
and
really good stuff.
Oh man, so good. But he was one of the presidents of our church, Thomas Monson, went over to Denmark and went to the what's it called? It's a castle. Oh gosh, the Freiburg Castle or something. Anyway, saw these paintings by Carl Bloch, and he just like fell in love with this artwork, And so the church started to use that artwork a lot. And in the last, I don't know when it was, it's been a few years now, but they had 2 exhibits of Carl Bloch's original works. And I went down there to that, and they're awesome. You've seen the paintings in print around, but when you see them in person, they are so good. They're so refined. They're so beautiful. It's about a 2-hour drive for me to go down there, but I went down there at least 4 times so I could just sit there and look at those pieces. They're so good, Another interesting thing is back in probably the 50s or 60s. The church was commissioning some of the best artists, some of the best illustrator painters at that time, like Harry Anderson and Tom Lovell and Kenneth Riley, and guys like that, to do paintings. I think it was important that they had, they wanted like the best. They just knew it was important to have good artwork, because it's important for the culture and all of that. So anyway, just really a rich tradition, as you look back, and what the church has done, and cultivating and continuing to encourage. They have an art show every 3 years at the church museum. There's a museum next to the Salt Lake Temple across the street, where they have art shows, and they display some of the historical works from some of those early painters. And anyway, what was I going to tell you about that? Yeah. Anyway, I guess just the museum, just the cultivation and the encouragement of continued of the arts. So it plays an important role. Anyway, so it's a long answer to your question, but it got me thinking a lot about there really is kind of a rich tradition and a support and encouragement of the art.
Yeah. I Googled Arnold Freeburg just while you were speaking, and he has a painting called Washington's Prayer at Valley Forge that hangs in this building. Like, it's the print of it hangs in this building. I walk by it every day and I didn't realize it. Right. So I love that. I love that painting. So thank you for helping me find the source. Wow. This guy's paintings are amazing.
Oh, he's so good. And he did a series for the 10 Commandments, the Cecil B. DeMille movie. He was one of the, he played a really important role in costume design and probably set design and stuff. So he was commissioned to do these paintings. And so while he was doing the Book of Mormon paintings, he kind of had to put those on hold so he could go and do these 10 Commandment paintings for Cecil B. DeMille that helped develop the look of the whole movie.
You saying that makes me think I have probably seen those at one point or another, just not knowing what the history of them was. But that sounds really familiar, that the paintings for that movie. It was like concept art, basically, before concept art existed. Yeah,
exactly. And they're awesome. They're just powerful. Like he's a powerful spirit, it comes through in the work, and anyway, so it's so pretty neat to see.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us. To me, it speaks of the intentionality of, they're willing to go to France. They're willing to, find the artists who are the best and bring them in and say, please, do this for us, because, you don't have excellence without intentionality is what I was trying to get to. And that, I think that tradition right there kind of helps you understand how to get to that point of pursuing the things that are worth thinking about, things that are lovely. So that's really cool. Well, Mark, one of our listeners, Mike, we usually ask our listeners for a question and we picked our favorite one. And this listener is halfway through college. So this is our last question for you. But they asked, as halfway through art school, they said, what advice would you have for a young Mike Malm if you could go back in time and, grab yourself by the collar, what would you, do you have any, a little bit of advice for that time of your life that you should share?
Yeah, that's a great question. If I could go back and talk to kind of like put my arm around my younger self and say, hey, listen, man, you just keep going. You keep the faith, you keep going. Don't go into debt. The worst thing you can do is put yourself in debt or something. So you have to find another job that leads you down a road that you don't want to go. I would say, do everything you can to stay out of debt, right? Be humble, but have confidence in what you can do, and realize that it's okay to be frustrated. I remember being at Dixie College, and I was trying to do these paintings or whatever, and it's like, just so frustrated. Like I'm not getting it, and just keep trying. Get a community of and these days you can go online and have a community, but find a community of people that are like-minded, and you'll learn from each other. You'll spur each other on. A little healthy competition is good, and just keep trying. Don't get discouraged or if you get discouraged, think, you know what, it's normal. It's normal and it's okay. But if you keep pushing, if you don't let that keep you from going, from trying, if you just keep trying, keep pushing, get some good critiques, get some good guidance, and just keep going, you're going to get better. And you look back and you're like, man. And I think that if you're a religious person, just pray for guidance, pray for the Lord to put people in your path, because he will. And you'll look back and you'll connect, you don't see the dots in front of you, but when you look back, you can connect the dots. You're like, man, look at what God has done for me, and introducing me to this person, or giving me this opportunity. Just have faith that you'll be led along. If this is what you feel to do, that, realize there's always opposition, but just hang in there with it, and things will come, opportunities will open up to you. And you'll look back and you think, man, what a journey, right? It's never easy. What a journey. But that's what I'd say. I don't know. Off the top of my head, that's
really great. Yeah. Thank you so much.
We are super grateful to Mike for joining us on the podcast this week. Okay, if you guys want to know more about Mike, if you want to follow him and figure out, okay, what's this guy up to on a daily basis? What's he working on? You can follow him on Instagram at Michael Malm Fine Art, all one word. And if you're interested in purchasing paintings from him or getting prints or things like that, you can visit his website, mikemalmfineart.com. And then you can also visit Sentient Academy. That is where Mike does a lot of his teaching, specifically those questions we asked about figure drawing. He talked about inventing with the figure, moving that. He talked about in this episode, that course. So if you guys are interested in learning how to improve your figure painting, you can visit his courses on sentientacademy.com.
As always, you can subscribe to us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube. For more episodes like this one, just search the Creative Community Podcast, and then leave us a comment or review. Mark, we had some really good feedback on our Drew Shetler episode. A friend on Instagram said that was exactly what they needed to keep them motivated and keep creating. And so I was really encouraged to hear that from our friends over on Instagram. But yeah, let us know that you enjoyed the show, or something that stood out to you or encouraged you. And then if you did find something valuable, be sure to share that episode with someone that you think might also find value from that. And we would appreciate it.
You can also connect with us on Facebook and Instagram, Destination Arete, ARETE, for more interviews like this one, as well as information about community activities and upcoming Arete projects. So we will be back in 2 weeks with another episode. See you guys then.